Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final episode of the Sports Hub for this semester. I'm Michael Wengrzyn, and alongside me are my familiar analysts, Alex Strouf and Jackson Jirik. Guys, how was your weekend, and are you ready to finish things up here?
It was a busy one. I got to celebrate a little bit, the big 2-1 on Saturday, so I'm feeling a little rough still on a Monday, but nonetheless, it was a busy weekend and a very good one spent with family and friends.
Yeah, it was a fun weekend for him. I know I got to enjoy with him. Radiothon was a fun thing for the both of us. Ready to finish up the semester and get home and see my family.
Yeah, I heard you guys broke the record actually for Radiothon, and
Did.
I know, Alex, you had a fun weekend celebrating your birthdays, so I gotta say, happy belated birthday for
Thank you.
myself.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. I appreciate you.
No
I
problem.
wasn't as lucky as you were on the wheel, though.
Yeah. Well, we got a special episode today as we'll be taking a look back at the year in sports for 2019, as well as taking a look back at some of the highlights of the decade. Let's start off the year in review with a look at what the UWSP athletics program accomplished. The biggest storyline is no doubt the UWSP men's hockey team winning their 6th national championship in program history back in March, as they became the first team in D3 hockey to win the title undefeated. The UWSP men's swim and dive team won their 20th consecutive conference title in February, which is a WIAC record for conference consecutive conference titles by any team, and both the UWSP volleyball and soccer programs advanced to the NCAA tournament. Guys, how are these achievements important to the school and as well to the athletic department?
Well, obviously, we know the UW Stevens Point Athletic Department is one of the most historical ones in the entire state. So to continue to add NCAA appearances and national championships is just that important. It becomes an appeal for potential athletes in the future, and it shows that we are doing things well in Stevens Point. So hats off to all these programs, and best of luck the rest of this season as it carries into 2020.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there. Just really creating the atmosphere here at UWSP of we know what we're doing, we know how to do it well, and we're the type of teams here that can, build players from when they come in as a freshman to when they leave here as a senior. You have a very good chance at walking out of this school with, a national championship under your name or your name under it. Even a conference championship, that's almost, it seems like every team has a good chance at winning that. So I think that's one of the biggest things here is to just being able to do that. Obviously, you want to win if you're going to be competitive in sports, and here at Stevens Point, it's a great place to do that.
It definitely helps out recruiting, and not only just for student athletes, but also for students as well. Students want to come here and experience what the university is like and what it has to offer. Athletics is a huge part of that, and with the success that the hockey team had, first team in D3 history to win the title without suffering a loss on the season, that's going to help out recruiting big time from players all around the country, because Point's hockey team is special because they don't just have players specifically only from Wisconsin, Minnesota, and other states nearby. They got players from all around the country as well, like Texas, California. Some of those bigger states, they recruit from guys there. And with that success that the athletics program has had as well, it's also translated in the creation of new programs. This semester, the women's wrestling program was officially added to the list of available programs here at UWSP. And that also is a big opportunity for girls who are interested in wrestling in the state of Wisconsin to go to a public university, not have to go anywhere too far out of the state to a more expensive private college, but also have the opportunity to compete with some of those colleges as well.
Right.
And with those kind of opportunities that are being opened up by the athletics programs, it creates an opportunity for students to go out and maybe contribute to that. Obviously, too, all the student accolades that players have received. April Gale, obviously being named All-American. Some of the hockey players, former captains Tanner Carty, Connor Rickman, former goaltender, they are in All-American honors as well. So there's some national recognition from UWSP as well that gets noticed by other programs around the country.
Well said.
Yeah, big one in hockey is there's no Division II program, anywhere. It's D1 or D3, and to be able to, compete at the level that they competed at and executed what they did last year, or earlier this year, just goes to show, like, hey, we're the next best thing there is for hockey. And I think that really, that's something to be said about, especially when you go undefeated going against private schools. And obviously April Gale, just huge, like, there's no one's better than her. She holds the record. So that's a big thing that happened this year. And it's a big thing that will be talked about, for years to come. She kind of set the tone this year.
Mm-hmm. And it sets a precedent for future students to come in and kind of contribute to those programs as well. With the successful year that the athletics program has had, SBTV has enjoyed covering these stories, and we look forward to continuing our coverage of Pointer sports in 2020. Now let's take a look at some of the news from college and professional sports this year, as this was a year of first-time champions. 3 out of the 4 champions from the Big Four sports were first-time winners, as well as one college program winning it all for the first time in March Madness. Big-name stars would make the jump from one team to another, and one of the most famous professional golfers in the world, who had once fallen from grace, won his first major championship in 11 years. Guys, what do you think were the biggest storylines of the year?
Storylines is an interesting way to phrase it. I mean, obviously, when you look at the first-time champions and the Toronto Raptors, the St. Louis Blues, the Washington Nationals, the Virginia Cavaliers, and men's college basketball, obviously, that's pretty darn awesome because you don't see that very regularly, where just about in every sport, a brand new champion is crowned. Obviously, in the NFL was the New England Patriots again. But you did bring it up. Tiger Woods winning the Masters. He got to put on the green jacket earlier this year. That's a pretty amazing story, but if I had to narrow in on just one, my pick would be the Toronto Raptors winning their first their first NBA championship. Kawhi Leonard obviously leading that team to their first O'Brien trophy, and bringing Toronto basketball to a level it's never even been close to being at, which was pretty darn incredible, especially when you take down a team like the Golden State Warriors. And ultimately, you dissect that team and make them the worst team in the NBA as it stands right now. So pretty crazy what 6 months can do.
Yeah, for me, couple ones, I would say Virginia is an interesting story for me because remember 2 years ago they were knocked out. They were the number 1 team. They were expected to go all the way. They were the favorite, lost to the 16th seed, first time ever. This year they go all the way. They weren't expected to be there, but they did it. That's pretty cool. But I think the Tiger Woods thing is just special because he is one of the most well-known players in the entire world, across the entire sports world. And for him to, come back the way he did, all the problems he had with family or whatever you want to call it, mentally, physically, for him to come back, it was pretty cool to see that. It kind of shows, like, never say quit, never die. But I think another one is the Washington Nationals. Ryan Zimmerman being the first ever National to get drafted. Took him however, I forget, was it 11 or 14 years it took for the Nationals to win it. He was with that team the entire time, and he finally gets to host up the World Series trophy. That was pretty cool to see. It was a very cool, interesting, good year in sports.
Yeah, but you can't really talk about this year without talking about the Tiger Woods Masters Championship. That, I think, is the moment of the year, and also it has the potential to be the moment of the decade, which we'll talk about later in the show. But Nick Faldo said it best, I think, during the broadcast when the celebrations were going on. Is like, that's the best scene you'll ever see in the history of golf, and I don't think we'll ever see a scene like that ever again from anybody, because there's many great golfers out there, but how many of them had the same kind of mainstream credibility as Tiger Woods? Yes, he did make some mistakes in his career, but he owned up to them. He worked not only to improve his status as a person, but also work on his golf game, come back from a lot of injuries he suffered throughout his career. So it's a really special moment of human preservation and self-determination as well. But in terms of, I guess, my personal favorite story from the year has to be the St. Louis Blues winning their first ever Stanley Cup championship, I believe, at the beginning of January. They were one of the bottom teams in the Western Conference.
The bottom team.
Fired their head coach, but their interim head coach led them all the way through the playoffs. They beat a couple of great teams such as the Dallas Stars and San Jose Sharks in the Western Conference playoffs, and then beat a good Boston team in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. So it's a special moment again for all three of those teams, and also Virginia as well, to celebrate their first ever championship in their respective sports. And that's, I think, again, one of the biggest storylines that we've seen out of anything from this year. So while it's been a great year to talk about sports, we're going to take our first commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be back to talk about the biggest moments in sports from the decade. This is the Sports Hub on SBTV.
I just wanted to get good grades and to do well, but it also made me realize that I have a lot of career goals.
You're there to get a full college experience, not only participate in your sport, but participate in things outside of that, and it's all about growing as a person.
My coaches have helped me with figuring out who I really am. Their lives are dedicated for us to succeed.
Welcome back into the Sports Hub. While the decade technically doesn't come to an end until the end of 2020, it's hard not to look back at the last 10 years and see what has happened. Guys, this is going to be a fun one to talk about. What do you think were the biggest stories of the decade?
I don't know. I think you can go a couple different ways with that. I think the big one that stands out to me is LeBron James making 8 straight finals. I think that's something that's just unmatched, and he's been unwavered and unmatched as the top guy in the NBA. And to make 8 straight finals appearances, although he didn't win them all, is just an insane streak that came to an end last year, obviously, when the Lakers didn't make the playoffs. But nonetheless, with the Cavs and with the Miami Heat, 8 straight finals, I think that's probably one of the biggest stories in my mind. The Patriots dynasty in the NFL, you could also make the case of. I think they've made 7 straight AFC championship games or something like that, which is just absolutely unheard of in football. So I think those are the 2 big ones that stand out to me, both LeBron James dominating the basketball court and the Patriots dominating the AFC.
Yeah, you got 2 very good ones. For me, I think the biggest storylines, there's a lot of them. I would say the Warriors is a good one, just because, in the NBA, it was, up until this year, it was so who's going to be in the finals? LeBron James and probably the Warriors. I mean, it was the last 5 years or so.
Something like that, yeah.
And, I mean, that's taken up a lot of the decade. It's hard to believe that, 10 years ago we were 11, 10 years old. That's crazy to think about.
Yeah,
I don't really remember much from back then. I was kind of just a little knucklehead running around. But definitely in the NBA, the Warriors and LeBron James. Hockey, I would say, the Boston bombing, the Red Sox winning the World Series that year, and then the Boston Bruins winning the Stanley Cup as well. That was pretty cool to see. Obviously, just the way the city came together, that would be a good one. I don't know. There's a lot to choose from. It's hard to say. It's hard to remember everything back from the last 10 years that's happened. But
It's been a lot.
It's been a lot.
Yeah, and the decade's not even over yet officially. We still got another, 20 days yet before we're finally, 22 days before we're officially at the end of the decade. So, there's still time for another special moment to happen, in sports. But I agree with what both of you guys have said about special moment. Biggest storylines from the decade. The New England Patriots dynasty, I think, is the one that stands out to me the most. Their continued dynasty, I should say, because last decade they won 3 Super Bowls. This decade they've also won 3 Super Bowls. Tom Brady, again, is still been one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. I know it's kind of tough to say that, as a Packers fan, but you got to respect the man. He's still got the talent. He still has the passion for the game. And, we'll talk. He'll be mentioned later on in the show, but it's kind of hard to say when we're going to see the end of Brady. So, the fact that the Patriots have continued to keep the dynasty for 2 decades now is something that I don't think we'll ever see again in sports.
It's hard to believe it.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that it's already been almost 20 years collectively as with the Patriots, pretty much as kings of the NFL. So that's the biggest storyline I think I see it in my standpoint. But you know, it's also too, you know, the technology that has gone into the game. You know, the efforts to make football safer. You know, what are the strategies in making or in winning baseball games? You know, not trying to be trash cans or yelling from the dugout. Like, I'm not talking about that kind of standpoint, but the technology that has gone into like each sport as well to like make the game safer, but also find ways to win has also been a huge improvement from the last decade. And teams are going to still find ways to do that in the next decade as technology continues to get more and more advanced. Now let's kind of talk about a little bit more personal notes. As I want to ask you guys, what were your favorite moments of the decades? And what moments did you maybe not enjoy so much?
Yeah, I've got two of each that I want to go over. One of each is completely Green Bay Packers related. We'll start with the high note. We go all the way back to 2011, February of that year. They beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in Super Bowl XLV 45, 31-25. Your final score. Aaron Rodgers named the Super Bowl MVP. Obviously, that's the peak of the decade for me personally as a sports fan, a Packers fan, a kid that grew up in Green Bay. So that was the peak for me. Another note that I loved, completely just as a fan of sports, was Sister Jean and the improbable run that the University of Chicago, or Loyola, Illinois, or Loyola Chicago, excuse me, yes. The improbable run they made. And Sister Jean, the 98-year-old sweetheart, was along for the ride. That was fantastic. On my least favorite notes, obviously with the Packers, the 2014 NFC Championship game, Brandon Bostic made his name known in a not good way on that game. And let me take you back to the 4th of July in 2016. That was the day when Kevin Durant announced that he would be signing with the Golden State Warriors, who had won 73 games, the most in NBA history the year prior. And as an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, that was the most angry I have been in sports this decade, probably ever.
Really?
Yeah.
You are a Thunder fan, though, so that does, I can see your frustration with
Yes,
that.
I was angry. That's all I got.
That's it.
Who wants to go next?
I can take care of that. Favorite moments, I would say, I don't really have championships because Minnesota sports teams don't win championships here. In Minnesota, I guess. So a couple special ones were two of them from Jim Thome when he hit his 600th home run, Comerica Park against the Tigers. That was pretty cool. Then my dad and I were fishing on our pontoon. It was like 10 o'clock at night, dark out, trolling on a lake in Minnesota. Jim Thome, we're down 2-1 against the White Sox at Target Field in Minnesota, hits a 2-run walk-off bomb in the 10th inning. Great moment, hanging out with my dad. That was pretty cool. Nino Niederreiter scoring a game-winning goal against the Colorado Avalanche.
That was a good one.
That was a great one for me. Way back when I was 10 years old, got that puck. That was pretty cool. At a Wild game. Least favorite ones, I guess I can't forget the Minneapolis Miracle. We didn't win anything. No, we didn't. I mean, we won
the game.
We won the game, but you know.
Might as well buy Marcus Williams a drink for that.
We didn't. I mean, we only won one game, so I mean, we lost. We got destroyed by the Eagles the next game. I don't know. There's no really like least favorite. There's just like a bunch of combined like expected losses. Like I've never expected a Minnesota sports team professionally to ever win anything. Ever.
I like that you have realistic expectations.
Like,
man.
I don't expect, like...
I like your realist attitude.
The Vikings are 9-4, okay? I don't expect them to win a playoff game this year. I don't expect them to win a playoff game this year. The Wild are god-awful this year. Like, we're terrible. I don't expect them to be good within the next 2 years, 3 years.
They're already working on tanking.
Yeah, exactly. The Twins, I mean... The last time they won a championship
This is hurting
was 9.
me too, James.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Why are you doing this?
But it's just like Twins, nope. Timberwolves, Lord knows when the last time they were good. Never. Like
pretty much.
Yeah, but,
Garnett
right?
days.
Yeah, never
KG.
do I expect a Minnesota sports team to win a championship in the foreseeable future. And that's the saddest part.
That's the saddest moment of the decade. Mike?
Well, geez, that's a tough note, man. I'm a little sorry for you at the same
It's okay.
time.
Doesn't hurt
I can't
anymore.
help but laugh at some Minnesota sports. As for me personally, I gotta agree with you, Alex. The Packers Super Bowl win, growing up in Green Bay, we had the day off from school the very next day. Got to go to the Lambeau Field celebration. Yeah. We got the day off from school the very next day.
I passed out at that parade and went to the hospital.
That's still
Fun fact.
one of the greatest days of my life, and I'm still hoping that the Packers can add to that, which will make it even more special.
Right.
The other one, this is on a not so personal note, but it's a really cool moment. The Chicago Cubs ending their 108-year curse and finally winning a World Series. You can't really, as a baseball fan, as a baseball purist, it's hard not.
I was
I
cheering
know
for
it
the
probably
Indians.
hurts you a little bit.
I was cheering for the Indians that World Series, but in all seriousness, that is pretty freaking awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. It's over. It's done. Cubs fans who have waited for generations can finally die a happy person, knowing that they won it not only for their dads, their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents who were probably around when the Cubs last won the World Series beforehand. It's a special moment in sports, but
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's over now. So hopefully they don't be like the 1985 Chicago Bears and just go back to that title over and over again. That I'm kind of worried about.
Yep.
As for bad moments in the decade, I got a couple, and they're obviously the first one, the heartbreaking 2014 NFC Championship game. I never felt so much more defeated at a Packers loss in my life. They were up 16-7 with 5 minutes to go. All they had to do was just run out the ball, get the onside kick. When Bostic botched that up, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget screaming at my TV and just falling to the floor crying.
This is depressing.
God, it's almost tough for me to even talk about it. And then, of course, the other one for me was the 2015 Final Four, the NCAA Final Four, the championship national title game against Duke. The worst officiated game I've ever watched as a college basketball fan.
I missed that one. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was tough.
There's been some painful Wisconsin sports moments.
Can we go to commercial? I'm sad.
Yeah, I think we deserve a commercial break here.
You guys got a day off after they won us. That'll never happen in my entire life, ever. The only way that'll happen is if the Packers win the Super Bowl this year. Everyone will just skip class. Never, ever will that happen.
We'll be right back with more Jackson Soapbox.
After our final commercial break, we'll do a round of buy or sell. You're watching the Sports Hub on SBTV.
You guys actually got a day off?
UW Stevens Point is home.
It's a university where professors know your name and get you involved in research.
They inspire us to realize big dreams.
At UW Stevens Point, sustainability is what we stand for.
Our beautiful campus encourages exploration, developing new fields, and problem solving for the real world.
It's a great place to launch your career.
UW Stevens Point is home.
Apply today at uwsp.edu.
College has given me the flexibility to pursue my passions and my interests, and I've recreated my identity for myself aside from just being an athlete.
My greatest personal discovery has been that I am capable of doing things that I didn't know I was capable of doing.
To be able to study what I wanted to and continue to play the sport I love, all of those things came together very nicely in one package in Division III.
Welcome back to the show. We're going to be doing a round of buy or sell, but this time it's a little bit different. Instead of focusing on what's coming up soon in sports, we're going to look a little bit further ahead, especially what could happen possibly in the next decade. Here we go. First one, the New York Yankees will at least make the World Series in the next couple years after they have failed to win one in this decade.
I'll buy that every day of the week. I think they probably make it next year, so I will buy that easily.
Now, do you think they'll win it next year, possibly?
I think it's too early to say right now, but I will say I think they make it next year. That's all I'm going to give you right now.
All right.
I agree with Alex that they'll make it next year, but I hope to God they don't win it.
Same here.
I think they'll make it. I think they're going to buy some big name like Rachael or Strasburg, and they're going to make it, and then I just hope they don't ever win one. I hope they never win one again.
Yeah, it would be pretty nice to not see the Yankees be constantly in the run every year, but they're a big money team. Money always is the driving factor. I'll buy it too. If not next year, the year after that, they'll definitely be back in the ALCS. I think I can probably say that's for sure. Here's a fun one. Next up, the college football playoff will be expanded to 8 teams, and it will take effect by at least the year 2023.
I'll sell that every day of the week. I don't see that happening. I don't think there's a good enough case for expansion of the college football playoff. I've always been in favor of the 4-team playoff. I could understand 6, but I still don't even think that makes sense. So I will sell that.
I'm going to sell it too. I think it'll be 6. I think it won't be 8. The thing, though, that the argument that I see coming up is like Wisconsin almost beat the 2 seed Ohio State, but like you said, it was a playoff game. You know, if you want to win, you win to get in. It's every week is a playoff game, and I think that's what we saw. Like when the Badgers faced the Gophers, was the Gophers were trying to get into the top 4. They lost their playoff game. They're out. The Badgers had, maybe an argument to get in, maybe over Oklahoma. I doubt that would have happened, but they lost, so they didn't get in. But I think 6 would be pretty cool because then you get to see maybe, a team like Utah this year get in, or someone, not that they won, but, some Oregon, like that, where it's not LSU, Clemson, Oklahoma, Bama, trying to think of other teams that are normally in there. But I don't know. It's kind of like that Cinderella team that would be in, but I don't believe it'll be 8.
I'm with you, Jackson, on the 6-team playoff train. It's tough. It'd be a lot to have 8 teams in the playoffs, but however, they do need to consider maybe adding a couple more spots and maybe giving the first 2 seeds a bye, kind of like in the NFL playoffs, because each conference does have 6 teams in the playoffs. So it'd be kind of like that format a little bit, which I could understand. But you also make up a great point too, that the conference championship games and the season finale games are also kind of considered playoff games as well.
Absolutely.
So in a sense, you're already in the playoffs, but not the 14 college football playoff. So
if you make your case, you're in. And a lot of teams had opportunities this weekend, and Utah being one of them that had the door was wide open with Georgia's loss, and they could not pull it together in the Pac-12 championship. So there's cases every year of teams that are right there, right on the edge, and they lose maybe a conference championship game or lose in the final week of the season, and they lose their opportunity. That's more on them. I've liked the 4-team playoff. I always have. This is a topic that I could go on for hours about, but I think they stick with the 4-team playoff through 2023.
Yeah, and again, we could spend the whole show on it pretty much, but we just got a couple more buy or sell topics to get through first. The next one is the NHL or NBA will award a new franchise to a city who has previously lost their previous franchise.
Yeah, I will buy this, actually. I think Seattle will get an NBA team before 2030.
Get the Supersonics back?
I think the Sonics do make a return in the next 10 years. That's the team that actually got me interested in NBA basketball way back in the day. So I know the people of Seattle are itching to get a team back, and I think they do. I think this decade is the time period that it will happen. I will buy that more on an NBA note than an NHL note.
Yeah, I think it would be the closest team to getting one would be the Sonics. I don't see it anywhere else in sports. In the next 10 years, there's a chance. The only way it's going to happen is with Seattle.
Yeah, I think Seattle's pretty much the prime team to get a previous franchise. They are getting an NHL team that is supposed to start play in 2021. However, Seattle has not had an NHL franchise before, so this will be an expansion team for the league. However, the Supersonics would be really cool to have back, as well as for the NHL. It would be kind of cool to see either the Hartford Whalers or the Quebec Nordiques come back, but at the same time, those markets also have teams that are close by, such as the Montreal Canadiens and the Boston Bruins as well. So it's kind of tough to tell whether or not those 2 markets will get back their old franchises. Finally, Tom Brady will win at least one more Super Bowl before he finally decides to retire from football.
It pains me to say it, but I'm going to buy it.
I
don't see it not happening. The Patriots dynasty, I know it's close to coming to an end, right? Or at least the Tom Brady era is close to coming to an end. But I do believe he gets another ring before he calls it a day.
I think he gets at least one more ring before he calls it a day. I could see 2 more. I wouldn't be surprised by it, but I mean, arguably the greatest player of all time, greatest quarterback of all time. I think he does get at least one more.
Yeah, you know what Brady's favorite saying is his most favorite Super Bowl ring is the next one. And if Tom Brady can at least finish with 8 Super Bowl rings, have 2 more than the Pittsburgh Steelers, unless they somehow magically win one, I think he'd be happy with that, finishing with the all-time Super Bowl mark for any player in NFL history with 8. So I'm going to buy that as well. He'll get one more before he finally decides to call it a career. So that's going to be all we have for you on today's episode. I'd like to thank Alex and Jackson for joining me on the show all semester, as well as a big thank you to our technical staff and for all the work they do to make this show possible. Be sure to like us on Facebook at SBTV UWSP Television, follow us on Instagram at SBTV_UWSP, and follow our SBTV and SBTV Sports Twitter pages. Lastly, don't forget to check out all the UWSP Athletics page for all things Pointer Sports. We'll be back with the sports show in the second semester, but until then, thank you for watching, and from all of us, have a happy holidays.
Peace out, baby.